Welcome, TFSM, to our student ministry online. And yes, things look a little bit different this week, but we are all online, so I'm really hoping that we can stay connected through this way. Last week, we actually started talking about this new series called Vibes. And this week, we are continuing with it because we were talking about how sometimes emotions drive us. Sometimes emotions just take control, and we end up making decisions based on the way that we feel. And a lot of times, that's not a great thing. Sometimes having this feeling of passion is good in a situation to where if we see something that's not just, or maybe because we love someone, we do something for them, and that's one thing. But tonight specifically, we're talking about what happens whenever we become angry. Because when we act out of anger, not a lot of good can come from that. So the bottom line that I want you to know before we ever start, so you could probably just remember this one line: because of Jesus, anger doesn't have to be the boss of you. Now, have you ever heard of road rage? If you have your license and you've been driving, you've probably experienced it a little bit. You've probably experienced it personally. You've been in the car with someone who has raged while driving. Now, I will say this, that as much as, so I'm in ministry, and I tried to not let my emotions drive me, but I will say one thing, that whenever I'm on the road and someone does something what I consider stupid in front of me, like cuts me off, or like just barely merges over or slams on brakes in front of me, I tend to get a little angry, to the point to where even my daughter's like, "What's wrong with Daddy? Why is he mad?" So a lot of times whenever we're driving, and I think you see this with a lot of people, that their anger takes over. You honking horn, yelling, other things that happen while you're driving. But just thinking about this road rage, maybe we've been in a car and somebody had road rage towards us. But if you've never experienced road rage, maybe you've encountered hallway rage. So what hallway rage is this. It would be what would happen when someone bumped into you in between classes. Or maybe if you're going from one place to the other and you're out and somebody like hits you, accidental or whatever, and made you maybe drop your phone or something like that. Or maybe they hit you really hard and knock you back a little bit. In turn, you went off. That's where the hallway rage comes in, that you just kind of go off, whether physically lashes out or in your mind you're like, "Oh, I can't believe that just happened." Hallway rage is real. On the road or in the hallway, we all know that kind of rage. Even if you don't yell at someone or act rudely in the lunch line, you probably know the feeling of that kind of rage inside you. Most of us don't actually call it rage or even anger, but you get the idea. Maybe you'd say that you're frustrated. Now, when your sister shrinks your favorite shirt in the wash, you aren't mad, you're frustrated. When your stepdad reminds you how you could get grounded for the weekend, you aren't angry, you're frustrated. When that one kid you know acts like they're superior to basically everyone, you get frustrated, enough to hope the face plant in front of you. Why? Because we don't like to think of ourselves as angry. I'll be honest. There's a lot of moments that I have going back to in ministry to where instead of saying angry, I say I'm just really frustrated because of this. There's a lot of moments to where I don't like to use the word angry because to me, anger kind of seems like a little petty. It's like, well, I'm angry because of this. Frustrated just sounds so much better. But we've been in this series about our emotions, or the vibe inside. But we're also talking about keeping those vibes from controlling us. And one of the emotions that shows up for everyone and tries to take over is, in fact, anger. The thing about anger is it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it means yelling at someone or losing your temper. That's how we normally think of it. But sometimes it means giving someone the silent treatment. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes when someone is mad at you and they're not saying a word, it's way worse than if they would just lash out and yell. In fact, maybe you're good at giving people the silent treatment. Not only is it a way for you to process your anger, but it's also a way for you to control the situation. You hold the power because you withhold the words. Even more complicated, not all anger is bad. There's the anger we feel when we see injustice, when we see things like certain groups of people treated unfairly, causes that we care about not being taken seriously, racism, people who don't have clean water, people who don't take care of the planet, whatever. There's like so many different things that we see it and we get angry about it. And in those moments, that kind of anger is very different and nowhere near as selfish as somebody bumping into you in the hallway or somebody doing wrong to you personally. But when we get angry at a situation, that's a different kind of anger. When we see things happen in the world that aren't right, it's a good thing to get angry. Just remember this. Jesus got super angry when people were mistreated, like flipping furniture angry. So it isn't always bad. In fact, sometimes anger is constructive. It moves us toward positive actions. But then other times it's destructive. It moves us toward regret and hurts people. And what are we supposed to do with that? Either way, anger is a powerful emotion. The question is, what do we do with it, and how do we keep destructive anger from taking over and bossing us around? We're going to look at a passage from the book of James in the New Testament. And James was the brother of Jesus. Now, but we got to understand that when Jesus was alive and walked the earth, James didn't follow him. It was only until Jesus was crucified and came back to life that James was convinced of who Jesus was. Eventually, James became a leader in the early church. He lived in Jerusalem, and he wrote his letters primarily to Jewish Christians. It's a letter full of wisdom when you read the book of James. And in the section we're going to look at today, James offers a principle that may sound a little too simple at first. But hang in there, because if you and I can learn to do this, it'll change everything. James starts by saying this: who is wise and understanding among you? And that's James chapter 3, verse 13. We hear the word wise a lot, but we may not really focus on what it means. Wise is different from smart. You can be born smart, but wisdom is earned. If you are wise, you take what you've experienced and learn from it. You understand that life is connected and that actions have consequences. And James is asking, how many of you get that? If you do get it, here's what I have to say next. And he continues. Who is wise? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. Once again, James 3, last half of 13. So James is making a connection here. He's saying that wise people are humble. Wise people are humble. And what does humility look like? It starts with a proper view of yourself. You don't see yourself as the exception to the rules. You don't think the world revolves around you and your desires. You don't think that you deserve better treatment than everyone else. You don't see everyone else as a means to an end that you want. James is saying that wise people don't do these things. He continues, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. It's James 3, verse 14. Harbor basically means to let something stick around. If you let stuff stay with you that makes you think you're better or more important, don't deny it, but instead call it out. Don't pretend to be fine. But then James says this: for where you have envy and selfish ambition,
There you find disorder and every evil practice. That's James chapter 13, verse 16. Let's say it a different way. When pride or arrogance gets loaded and lodged inside of us, it comes out in our actions. Not exactly great news, but he doesn't leave us hanging. A couple of verses later, he asks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? That's James chapter 4, verse 1. I bet I could stop right there and everyone would have an answer. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Parents with unrealistic rules, younger siblings that won't stop being annoying, friends that don't text back or message back, a parent that just, for some reason, is just, you're not clicking with them that week for some strange reason. People who have obnoxious social media accounts. We all have an answer outside of us that causes problems among us, but James isn't buying it. He answers his own question by saying, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? In other words, your mom may drive you crazy.
We all have an answer outside of us that causes problems among us, but James isn't buying it. He answers his own question by saying, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? That's James chapter 4, verse 1. In other words, your mom may drive you crazy and your little brother may be annoying, but what causes the arguments? It's not them. It's maybe you. Or more specifically, what's in you. And this is a big deal because as long as we think the problem is someone else, their behavior, their character, their mistake, will never deal with anger, the anger problem inside of us. We think the problem is people not doing things our way. But James is saying the problem is that we want to get our way. But as long as we think the problem is outside of us, we'll never take care of what's inside of us. You may disagree because maybe you feel like the things you want are things that have to be earned. Things like freedom, respect, trust, and responsibility. And when you don't get the things you feel that you've earned, it doesn't seem fair. And you're right. But James isn't talking about what's fair and what isn't. He's saying that if you want to get rid of the root of your frustration and anger, you need to be willing to admit that the problem is in you. The problem is when you don't get what you think you deserve. So what do? Well, we have to change the script. When other people aren't acting like we think they should, or we aren't getting what we want or what we think we deserve, we have to change what we say. Instead of saying, he's being selfish, she's being annoying, they're being rude, instead we say, you know what the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. I understand that this sounds terrible, but I'm telling you, when you start doing this, relationships change. Your frustration level changes. Your anger changes. But why? Because you're no longer looking to other people as a reason for why you feel the way you feel. As long as you are looking to other people as the reason for feeling the way you do, other people have control of your emotions. And that's something to really think about, is to not let people control you. Now, you're going to find in life sometimes people are going to be what I like to call manipulative. Okay? Manipulation is a tactic that many people use. It's not a good thing. If you find someone who's manipulative, you need to make sure that they do not have control of the situation. Manipulation really is a powerful tool, and it's also a very dirty tool. So make sure that people don't know how to manipulate you by making you mad or telling you what you want to hear, and that way you just kind of give in. Make sure that your emotions don't drive you. Now, we're talking about being upset and being not upset. But of course, there are circumstances that should upset you. Like when you're treated unfairly by a sibling or a friend or a parent. But imagine if in the middle of feeling your anger and frustration, you were able to say, part of the problem, not the whole problem, but part of the problem is that I'm not getting what I want. Just be willing to say that out loud helps you it helps take you to keep yourself from being controlled by anger and frustration. Owning what you can own in the problem keeps your anger and frustration from driving you and owning you. And no matter who you are, that's a good thing. To not let your anger and frustration drive you. Based on what we've talked about today, here's my question for you. What's your relationship with anger? Do you control it, or does it control you? As we go off into these really not understanding what the weeks are going to be like, we are going to have options for small groups to talk, and there are going to be group chats. So if you're not a part of a group chat, please reach out to me. I'll make sure there's a number you can get to. But what I want you to do is talk to somebody. Figure out, how do we deal with anger? When somebody says something we don't like, we don't need to just go over and become physically violent. That's not the way to go at all. However, I do want you to process with other people, how do I do better? Let that be your prayer as you go off and you start talking to other people that are in your small group, other youth leaders, myself, who people are coming to me and talking with me about this and what we've talked about today with in the scripture of James. I want you to start figuring out, where does the anger start, and how can I keep that anger from controlling me? Because it is okay to be angry at first, but when we make decisions based on that anger, that's when things can get tricky. So, asking that question again, what's your relationship with anger? Do you control it, or does it control you?